The people in your workplaces are exactly the same. If you don't know who they are and you're not interested in them as a human being, they're not going to do anything that they don't have to do. They're going to be heads down, worried about their personal and professional achievement.
You're listening to the Building a Coaching Culture podcast. If you need to compete and win in the 21st century labor market as an employer of choice, this podcast is for you. Each week, we share leadership development, coaching, and culture development insights from leading experts who are developing world-class cultures in their own organizations. And now, here's your host, J.R. Flatter.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. J.R. Flatter here again. My good buddy, Lucas.
Hello.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
So I wanted to jump into this human-to-human relationship discussion from leadership perspective, from coaching perspective, coach to leader, coach to other human beings. One of the elements that we talk about a lot in our coaching is the technical, cognitive, and emotional intelligence continuum. Just to revisit for a minute, early on in life in our careers, we're most interested in how well do we know how to do something technically. So you're a computer scientist. I would imagine your degree from RIT taught you the fundamentals of computer science, where I don't even know what those two words mean, but you should. And that's the fundamental knowledge, abilities, and experiences that you need to have to function as a computer scientist. The cognitive aspects of it, and you learned some of this in your bachelor's degree, and you learned some of this in your early career, is how to engage your brain and make decisions amongst multiple courses of action, how to collect data, conduct analysis with that data, make the decision, and then go execute that decision. That's largely a cognitive function. So techno and cognitive go pretty much hand in hand. Still relatively early in your career, relatively linear. There's well-defined rules of how one does that well. But then you get into this sphere of emotional intelligence. And for me, emotional intelligence is all about your willingness and ability to build and sustain relationships with other human beings. And I don't know whether I just taught a class on intergenerational leadership 1 week ago today, actually. And so it's at the forefront of my mind. A lot of the intergeneration friction is a function of where they're at in life, as much as it is a generational thing. And so some of the things that frustrated me when you were growing up as a millennial, it has much to do with where I was in life and where you were in life, is the fact that you were born in 1992 and were part of the millennial generation. But now that you're in your 30s, when I was in my 30s, well, I wasn't even 30 when you were born, but you came to know me when I was in my 30s. You're who I was in many ways those couple of decades ago. And now Declan is you, your son. And so you're seeing a lot of the frustrations I saw and a lot of the joys too. Let's not focus entirely on frustrations. The joys of being a parent are far outweigh the frustrations, for me anyway. So what are your initial opening thoughts on this human-to-human connection idea?
Yeah, I mean, I like starting with that TCE continuum alignment. I think maybe at the beginning of your career, you have these cognitive ideas like, oh, you know what, I would have done X, Y, or Z if I was in charge. Those happen all the time. And maybe after a couple of years of experience, you have more data that says, oh, if I would have done that, would it have worked out? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. So I think the idea that it kind of evolves, from the technical to the emotional plays out in my experience. And then I almost think like the emotional side, your ability to bring people together, build a team, do something that you can accomplish individually. It doesn't necessarily get talked about or praised that much with American culture. It's like that individual accomplish X, Y, or Z. But if you read the biography, you read about the teamwork and all the people involved.
Yeah, that's a bit of a paradox. We praise the self-made person and criticize the person born with a silver spoon or an overnight success. None of those three are true. They're all mythical ideals. So I don't know if it's a function of my age and now watching you and Declan and all the other grandbabies and children, or if it really is that we're in the 25th year of the 21st century and the world has changed. But the reality is, irrespective of its source, well, maybe not completely irrespective, that what for years and probably a century was called soft skills are now absolutely essential. I'll put my professor hat on for a second and talk about the beginning of work study. We didn't ever study work until the early 1900s. A man named Taylor is probably the most famous work study scientist. And what he was measuring was literally how much a man could shovel in a day, how much a man could dig in a day, and methods of improving the technical skill of shoveling. And I'm being extreme to make a point. It was much broader than that. There was a study in the 1930s trying to increase productivity at General Electric. And they thought about, did workers prefer to be in a well-lit work environment or a duller work environment? And so they were brightening the room, dimming the room, and they found out the productivity increased no matter whether it was bright or dark. And it was ultimately realized they were working harder because someone was paying attention to them. And so as far back as the 1930s, we started to realize, it's just not a machine, it's a human being. There's a human being holding that shovel. And when they go home at night, somebody loves them. Somebody's happy to see them. They come running to the door to embrace them. But yet here, nearly 100 years later, so we're well into the 20s of the new century and the new millennia, we're still struggling with this ideal on both sides of the table, leadership and employee. Where are those boundaries? And what's appropriate? What are the expectations?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it, this idea of oh, we're working with other humans, let's get to know, what makes them tick. It's kind of talking about motivation, different ways to motivate people. And we've talked in the past about how it might traditionally be, here's your compensation package and there's the motivation that you need. But it seems to be that that's not sufficient, of a conversation at least. That's not the be all end all. And people want to, know about what it's like, what's the experience, what else am I getting out of this, or, what pitfalls might I need to avoid in this organization, things like that.
No, you're spot on. I learned very early on in the life of our company, there's three kinds of rewards I can give someone. Incremental, which is a cost of living raise. Multiplicative, which is a bonus or a promotion. And exponential, which is equity, ownership. None of them sustain. I don't care how big of a bonus you get. The half-life of a bonus is days at most, a month if you're lucky. A promotion, same. You probably 6 months. You're really happy you got the promotion, and then you get into a routine again. If you are an owner of a company or you receive equity as a leader in the company, that's a short-lived thank you very much, because you're in a place in life where you have tons of choices, and any of those, and I don't mean to appear cynical at all. because I tend to be a very optimistic person. But we're all human beings, and we all have the same brains that think and act the same way. You need something else. Even in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, or let's go back even further, the birth of the Industrial Revolution in the 1750s, depending on where you were in the world, cottage industries that moved to the large factories, where you might live in a town where the company owned the store, the company owned the laundromat, the company owned everything. And so every dollar you were getting, you were probably giving right back. You needed something more than that wage to give you joy in your life. And almost exclusively, that joy was found outside of work. And now, here, well into the 21st century, the global labor market is demanding that we provide that as part of the work experience. And in a virtual world, with the kind of mobility that a workforce has, you better be thinking about, am I providing an atmosphere? And I'm hesitating to use the word culture because I hammer on that drum a lot. I probably will before we're done here. If you're not providing an atmosphere where you're recognizing and appreciating each employee as a human being, you're going to find yourself in the dustbin of history. What are your thoughts? You hire a lot of Gen Zs.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day in the context of like when you're an adult and you're eating well or eating, healthy food, exercising, you're kind of saying that like this is rewarding to me. I'm choosing this. It's not just rewarding by default because, there's some pain involved or, it doesn't taste as good as cheese, a vegetable. Um, but I think like that deliberate choice gives things like that more meaning. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that. Is that something that you can build in an organization?
Define that for me again, please.
Like the providing kind of choice on, this is what might motivate you versus another person, providing different options for that.
I think that's part of it. And this is one of the reasons we talk about technical, cognitive, and emotional alignment. Some of the biggest mistakes I've made in hiring or promoting was promoting someone out of where they desired to be or where they found their joy. It's a reality of the workforce. There's 8.1 billion of us on the planet, that a lot of us want to be the best technician for our entire life. We have other priorities in our life beyond our career. We may not want to be a supervisor of other human beings. And as your employer, I have to recognize that, encourage that, and show appreciation for that. So, yeah, there is some measurement in our minds as we think about hiring and we think about promoting, think about moving you into a different role, might be a lateral, but in a different vertical of the business. Is that something you want to do? So it's become part of our dialogue, and I think a necessary dialogue beyond the paternalistic view of it's good for the company. Is it good for the person? So I think, for the last century, I should say, people deferred joy or fulfillment, even purpose, until they retired. Because the 20th century work model was get educated or get skilled, work, and then retire. The 21st century work model, out of necessity and desire, is learn, work, learn, work, learn, work. Industries are changing so fast, technologies are changing so fast that a Gen Z entering the workforce, looking ahead 30 years or even 5 years, recognizing the technologies they're using and the processes they're using and the products they're developing may not even be there in 5 years. So are we as employers making a human-to-human connection with them, saying, as the world changes, we're going to help you change along with it. Keep advancing your skills. You hear the word upskilling a lot. making sure that there are no versions anymore. So I was going to say, if you came in knowing 2.0 and 3.0 comes in, but really systems are updated every day behind the scenes. And so are we keeping pace with those changes, both as an employee and an employer? But even beyond that, am I doing that because I'm interested in you as a human being, not as an asset, right? We hear this word human capital, and human capital is an abstract. The person standing in front of you is a human being. So you shouldn't be thinking or talking about human capital when a human being's in front of you. And it's abstraction that we send statistics in to the Department of Labor to report on our employee pool, who's there, what are their ages, what are their ethnicities, and all of those other demographic markers that we've created. That's human capital, but the person in front of you is a human being. And are you recognizing and appreciating that? They're going to frustrate you. I make the joke all the time that my children mock me, and now my grandchildren are starting to mock me. I love that because they're comfortable enough around me that they could feel they could be a human being and not fill a role of child and grandchild. Our employees tend to do the same thing, and I love that equally as well. The students that I educate very quickly, and I tell them one of my measures of whether the cohort is growing well is how easily they can be comfortable around me. And we teach and believe that you become comfortable and build that trust and safety because you are being a human being. You are showing vulnerability. You're recognizing the blurred lines between personal and professional achievement. You're encouraging personal achievement, realizing that personal achievement is going to give time and space for professional achievement. Professional achievement's often necessary to create personal achievement. Anyone who listens to our podcast or goes to any of our programs knows what my 3 life goals were for the first 30 years of my adult life. Raise the 4 of you as a family, get you educated, however you chose, and build some financial freedom. None of those say I wanted to be a doctor, or I wanted to be a coach, I wanted to be a CEO. They were all personal. I wanted to be financially stable, not living paycheck to paycheck, so that I could pay more attention to my children and grandchildren. Not that I wanted a big bank account or I wanted a big title.
Going back to like the parent-child relationship, there's a knowledge gap there, there's an experience gap. And so you can't necessarily use your language to, so there's the whole like explain it like I'm 5 concept, like get down to my level and try to translate this concept in terms that I understand. I think we've been saying like this person, this human capital, it's a human being. There's a challenge probably in explain it like I'm a human, not looking at sales forecasts or so. Yeah, I guess what are some ways that we can do that? Like, oh, I want to translate my, long-term company goals to something that makes sense on a lower level.
Yeah, what a beautiful question and observation. Talk to me like I'm a human. Write that down before you forget it. Every time we get together, I learn something from you. And like any good coach, you've caused me to pause and think. Some very technical and cognitive things are coming to mind, but I know there's a much bigger answer. Technically, communicate, communicate, communicate until you get tired of hearing yourself say it. And I borrow that directly from John Kotter in his book, Leading Change, Kotter with a K. And so, the speech by Henry Ford, the CEO of Ford, coming off the stage and saying, yeah, I given that speech 3,000 times. That's communication. Secondly is demonstration. So what is the movie where the guy has the red stapler?
Oh, Office Space.
I'm a people person. You can't just communicate you're a people person. You better demonstrate that you're a people person. So demonstrate to your team, to your family, to your church, to your soccer club, that you do desire to have a human-to-human connection with them. And there's myriad ways to demonstrate having conversations with them as if they were a human. I'm going to cite you forever now on that. No, not that I have to, I get to. But other ways too. So, being interested in more than just their productivity. And I mean genuinely interested. And I think that's the big piece. One of the characteristics you and I talk about when we teach leadership is humility. And I can say all day long that I feel like a tremendously blessed man, blessed to have the family and have the team that I have, to be able to deliver this coaching education and coaching that we do. But saying it's not enough. You better be out demonstrating, and in your own heart and in your own mind, as you lay your head on your pillow, asking yourself, is this genuine or am I going through the motions? Until you yourself can consider it genuine, everyone's going to see right through you. And they're going to be whispering in the hallways about what a fake you are and how disingenuous you are. And I define culture as the story the world's telling about you, the story the world's telling about Flatter, the story the world's telling about our family. And what is being whispered about you in the hallways? Is this a good place to work? Are they going to take care of you? Are they genuinely interested in your well-being? Yeah, so that's a gigantic question that you've just asked, and one that's going to take a lifetime for all of us to formulate and communicate and demonstrate.
I'm curious. You had mentioned earlier, like this trend that seems to be happening where the expectation is that, some of the meaning in my life is going to come where I'm employed at that organization. And I think some, I don't know, scholars or just pop culture, just people that are commenting, they sometimes talk about this like third space outside of work and your house that maybe used to be the YMCA or the church or whatever public space. And it does seem like how that when that's shrinking, it is kind of being put on the workplace. Do you think that's a positive change, or what do you believe about that?
Yeah, and that's another beautiful question. I'm just looking at a slide here. One of the things we talk about is look 30 years into the future and figure out how you're going to get there. And we would call those lifetime goals. But while you're on that journey, make sure you're finding joy on the journey. And the thing I consider harmful about that idea of putting that burden on the workplace, and it isn't just me, the employer, or anyone else who hires people, but it's a burden on the individual too, that they're expected to find their joy in their workplace. Well, with 8.1 billion of us on the earth, the math doesn't add up. And it's just one of the realities of life that you might not find your joy at work. You play guitar, you're a cartoonist, you're a father and a husband. And I suspect some of that is seeking your joy outside of the workplace, additional joy. One of the mentors and coaches in our world lived a third of her life in the hospitality industry. And now she's turned around and is a coach to leaders in the hospitality industry. And when I met her, she was promoted into a role where she had thousands of housekeepers that reported to her, and it was her responsibility to develop them. And I know they're finding joy at work, but it's amongst each other. It isn't the tasks that they're performing, because I'll guarantee you the person who follows me after I leave a hotel has their work cut out for them. But the interactions they have human to human are creating joy in that profession. And that profession's going to be there as long as we have a hospitality industry. It might be migratory, and some number of those housekeepers might become that leader and coach that is part of our team. But the percentages are not there of how many of them will be able to migrate, will choose to migrate. And so they need a place to find their joy, or create their joy, discover their joy. And it might be guitar playing, it might be cartooning, might be art, might be what it was for me, and that was my family, raising my family, now my grandchildren, participating in their growth, being a mentor and a coach educator is where I find my joy. That's part of my blessing, is that I get to find joy in my work. And I consider, that makes me more humble about how blessed I am to be in this. I know that's a bit of a rambling answer. I think each of us has mobility if we choose, irrespective of our starting line. Some of us start farther behind than others, but that's not something to be ashamed of or condescend. If you are further ahead in life than your peers at certain stages of your life, that's a blessing. And it isn't something to be shunned, to be appreciated. But regardless of where you started, you can break out and find joy in your life. And it's almost certainly going to be in a human to human relationship, whether it's at work, whether it's singing to your son or drawing cartoons for me. I have a brand new one on my desk here that I have to frame and hang.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned the word joy maybe 20 times. And I think,
Sorry.
but you think about, like, what are we talking about when we're saying, like, what else is there besides compensation? And we're really talking about joy and love and meaning. And it doesn't necessarily help to shy away from those things, like it, we need to confront them if that's what, humans are looking for. And I'm an experienced human, so I would say that I do look for joy and meaning. And I think, yeah, it's just a really interesting mindset to have in this kind of employer-employee relationship can become sterile and cold.
Yeah, I'll give you an example from my own life. So I sit here in the headquarters. At any given time, there's probably a dozen people running around here, sometimes more, sometimes less. And I'm always hearing conversations in the kitchen and food on the kitchen table that people have brought in, and laughter. And someone who's focused on the technical and cognitive might go, does anyone ever work around here? Right? Because all I ever hear is people talking in the hallways. But the reality of a workplace is you do most of your work in 20% of your time, and the rest is administrata and what I would call filling the white noise. So more and more we're recognizing as we get deeper into the 21st century that those conversations in the hallway and those relationships that they're building are more important than if they were sitting at their desk cranking out yet another spreadsheet for whomever might choose to read it. So yeah, you have to support and encourage those interactions. A couple of the highlights of our year are our summer picnic and our winter holiday. I know all of us in the leadership team look forward to those occasions where we actually get to be in the same room or in non-work clothes, ugly sweaters in the winter and shorts and Hawaiian shirts in the summer. What's your closing thoughts as we head out the door?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that idea of genuine connection, I think just I would encourage people to, if they don't know the people they work with, whether it's remote or in person, just try to, bridge that gap if you can. And it's been rewarding. I know that you have rewarding relationships in your work. So yeah, I would encourage everybody to do so.
Yeah, you've reminded me of one of my favorite questions, and that is, why are drivers so rude on the highway? And the root cause of that is, well, A, they feel comfortable in their security of their cage that they're driving down the road. But more importantly, they don't know who you are and they don't care who you are. You're just another car in the way, inhibiting their freedom. And the people in your workplaces are exactly the same. If you don't know who they are and you're not interested in them as a human being, they're not going to do anything that they don't have to do. And I don't want that to sound cynical again, but they're going to be heads down, worried about their personal and professional achievement. Once you make that human-to-human relationship, you don't get flipped off. You don't get cut off. So yeah, absolutely encourage you. Make it part of your style. Make it part of your culture that you know each other. And then there's appropriate level of love that you can create and sustain in a workplace. It's not the same love that you and I have, father and son, or husband and wife, me and the chairwoman, but it's an appropriate love that we have for our coworkers and their families and their goals and objectives. All right, my friend, we'll see you soon. Well, that concludes this episode of Building a Coaching Culture. I truly hope that this episode was helpful to you. If it was, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Maybe stop and give us a rating or a review and share this podcast with someone who might find it helpful as well. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.